Colson Williams. This is a story about a special person who reinforced what I've learned from my mother and father about faith, family, and love. This is a story about the individual who made each of these important fundamental beliefs real, and this is a tribute to her. My sister Kylie was on the track at a starting block in a meet on March 2010, as my grandmother, Anna Mae Williams, who we call Mae, was making her way into the stands. She stumbled on the last step. Being 78 at the time, she just laughed it off as old age. The start gun sounded, and even though I was not there, I could still hear her yelling, "Go Kylie, go Kylie, go." Stories are told in Brownsville still today that when my father was playing football in high school, when he would break for a long run, my grandmother, Mae, would beat him to the goal line. Her family was her life, and that's the way it had always been. The Thursday after the Monday track meet will be ingrained in my mind forever. It was just another typical day at school for me in the second grade. Later during that day, I was called to the office with my things, and I saw my father waiting at the end of the hall. Nothing was said at the time. I was just happy to be leaving school. But when we got into his truck, with teary eyes, he told me that Mae was very sick and we had to go to the hospital. Just the year before, she had been diagnosed and successfully beaten breast cancer. Even though she had gone through chemo, radiation, and a mastectomy, not one gripe, complaint, or feeling sorry for herself. In fact, she was the one consoling us all. She would always say, "It'll be okay. God has a plan." However, this casual stumble in the stands just a few days before was more than just age. It was the start of something that would change our lives forever. She was diagnosed with transverse myelitis, a rare neurological disorder that paralyzed you from the waist down. At the age of 78, she was a paraplegic. From March 2010 to May 2011, Mae was in the hospital in Tyler, and Poppy, my grandfather, was at their home. It was by far the longest time they'd ever been apart in their 62-year marriage. Mae nearly died many times during the course of that year, and I can remember vividly going to the hospital numerous times and thinking that it was the last time I would ever see her. After pulling through once again, however, she would always remind us that God has a plan, and He is not through with me yet. What is imprinted on my mind to this day, however, is that she would say this with a smile and a chuckle, even while her family was falling apart. May 2011 was a time for cautious optimism, because it was a time when Mae got to come home. After many months of renovating Poppy and Mae's home, it was time to celebrate. I remember all of us being there when the ambulance brought her home. This celebration, however, was very short-lived. Poppy went to the hospital for a simple procedure and died unexpectedly on July 5th, 2011. Needless to say, after looking back, that time period was the most traumatic of my life. I was old enough to see what was happening, but not yet old enough to understand why. But Mae would always tell me, God has a plan. I give you this bleak background so you can at least attempt to understand, to see through the eyes of an 8-year-old and his perception of what was happening to Mae at that time. I would like you to do now is share with you the lessons that I've learned from Mae from a perspective of a 15-year-old, and see what her strength through rough times have taught me. First, it taught me about faith. One of Mae's favorite verses is James 1, verse 2 through 4, the New International Version, which reads, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you will know that testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." I will always remember standing beside her bed over the years on many occasions, and her teaching me no matter what hurdles I may face in life, that my belief in God and my faith in God is enough to get me through. Not only through her words, but also how she handled the adversity. I learned that trials and tests can produce unwavering faith, and unwavering faith makes us whole. Second, she taught me about family. During that year, she was out of her home in 2010 and 2011. My dad was at the hospital nearly every single day. I remember thinking at the time, why did he go so often? Because there was nothing he could really do. And his response was, because his love and concern for her. He explained to me that there wasn't a point in his life, from the time he could remember, that Mae was not there for him, and that he was going to be there for her as well. After our talk, I reflected that Mae had always been there for me, as far as I could remember. She reinforced that notion every holiday, be it Easter, Thanksgiving, or Christmas, should revolve around family. For Easter, I remember the colored chicks that Mae bought us. For Thanksgiving, I remember the huge layout of food that Mae cooked. And for Christmas, I remember my uncle in gold underwear at my Mae's house. It was always a festive time, and she had a rule: when family is together, you enjoy each other, and we always did. Finally, she taught me about unconditional love. There was one time in my life that I remember getting in trouble with Mae. I was 7 years old, and we were in the kitchen at the table ready to eat supper. I felt special because there was an unspoken rule where Mame and Poppy sat, and I got to sit in Mame's seat that night. She cooked stew that night, and since I didn't like stew, I made it known to everyone that I was not going to eat. Mame thought different. She lovingly told me that it's fine, go get the switch, and she was going to spank me for my attitude. Needless to say, I found a new love for stew that night, and she did not have to spank me. However, I was sad at the time because of the situation and thought that Mame would always say that to me. But she reassured me that she loved me because who I am and not because what I did. In other words, don't confuse my poor decisions and punishment with love. That is something I have always remembered. Needless to say, Mame is one of the most important people in my life and has and will continue to leave an impression on me with her wisdom that I hope to pass down to my children one day. And I can only hope that as I go through life, I can have a positive impact on others like she had on me. But also remember that as you go through life, no matter how disabled you might be, how lonely you might feel, or how trapped you actually are, that someone out there is looking at you to be an example. Someone out there is looking at you for advice, for wisdom, but most importantly, for love. Someone out there is in desperate need of a Mame in their life. So today, I challenge you, be that person for someone. Be that light that guides them along their path by teaching them what Mame taught me, to have unwavering faith, to keep family close, and to always show unconditional love towards others.
Okay, Giovanni, what's the time?
6:30.
6 minutes, 30